Let's set the scene. A night with no moon. A night cold enough that breath turns to mist before it leaves your lips. A night that, in the world we know, the world George R.R. Martin built, and HBO rendered in fire and shadow, ends with the wall still standing, the Night's Watch battered, gutted, hollowed out, but standing, Jon Snow alive, Mance Rayder defeated. The Wildlings turn back. 102 men. That is what the Night's Watch had to defend the most important structure in the known world. 102 men against 100,000 wildlings, against giants riding mammoths, against Tormund Giant's Bane and his raiders coming through the southern gate, against Ygritte and her archers in the darkness of Castle Black's courtyard. 102 men held the wall. In the show, it's portrayed as desperate and heroic and almost impossible, because it was. It was a near thing, a very near thing. So here's our question. What if it wasn't enough? What if one decision had gone differently? What if Alliser Thorne had fallen 10 minutes earlier? What if the giant had broken through the inner gate before the chain was secured? What if Jon Snow had taken an arrow in the dark, stumbling through the courtyard, before he could find and hold the defense together? What if the wall fell on the night of the Battle of Castle Black? Let's find out. In the actual battle, the Night's Watch holds the inner gate. Gren and 5 brothers die holding it against a giant, but they hold it. You know, that act of sacrifice, 6 men planting their feet and reciting their oath in the face of something that should have crushed them, is one of the most quietly devastating moments in the entire series. It is the wall in human form, duty, endurance, the willingness to die in the dark so that others might live in the light. In our timeline, the chain breaks. Not through cowardice. These men are not cowards, but through misfortune. The giant strikes a second time before Gren can brace. The gate splinters, and 60 wildlings pour through the gap into the tunnel before anyone can stop them. Above, on the wall's surface, the battle is already going badly. Alliser Thorne took an arrow to the shoulder in the first exchange and has been fighting with one arm since, his orders coming slower, his control of the defense fraying. The bowman on the elevator platform, who in the original battle held the route up and down the wall with terrifying efficiency, runs short of arrows at the worst possible moment. The elevator mechanism jams. The giant Mag the Mighty is not the only one at the wall. There are 4 others along the length of the structure, each testing for weakness, each waiting for the signal that the main gate has been taken. When the signal comes, a horn blast from inside the tunnel, all 4 giants begin pushing simultaneously. The wall does not fall. The wall is 700 feet of ancient ice and magic and the bones of the earth, and it does not come down tonight. But it doesn't need to. The gate is open, the tunnel is full of wildlings. And Castle Black, the great way station at the wall's base, is about to be taken from both sides. Jon Snow is in the courtyard when it happens. He has been fighting hand to hand for 2 hours, exhausted, bleeding from a cut above his eye, surrounded by the chaos of a battle he is winning by inches. Ygritte, the woman he loved, the woman he left, the woman he cannot stop seeing in his peripheral vision every time she draws her bow, steps out of the shadow near the well. Their eyes meet. That moment from the show, his face, her face, the arrow she cannot quite release. In our timeline, someone else releases it first. Not at Jon. At the Night's Watch brother raising a crossbow at Ygritte's back. The arrow misses, sparks off the well, and in the chaos and the turning and the crossbow going off, Jon stumbles and takes a blade across the ribs that drops him to one knee. He is not dead. He is not even gravely wounded. Yes, but he is down, and the defense needs him up. And by the time he gets up, the inner gate has fallen, and the wildlings are coming through in numbers that cannot be stopped by 102 men. Castle Black falls before dawn. The reckoning at the wall, Mance Rayder, who has been watching from the tree line, receives the signal. He is not a foolish man. He is perhaps the most intelligent military commander in this entire story. A former brother of the Night's Watch who went native, who learned the way of the free folk from the inside, who has spent years building a coalition out of 100 warring tribes through personality and vision alone. He has been waiting for this signal for months. He rides into Castle Black with the morning light. The surviving brothers of the Night's Watch, perhaps 30 men, the rest dead or fled into the tunnels or captured, are disarmed and held in the common hall. They are not killed. This is important. Mance Rayder has not come south to massacre a garrison of old men and green boys. He came south because the White Walkers are coming. He came south because the people he leads, 100,000 men, women, children, elderly, every living soul north of the wall, needed somewhere to go before the dead took them. He walks into the common hall and he looks at the survivors and he says, in a voice that carries the particular authority of a man who has nothing left to lose and therefore nothing left to fear, "The wall is open. Your war is over. Mine is just beginning." What Mance does next. This is where the theory gets interesting, because Mance Rayder is not a straightforward conqueror. Nay, he is not Genghis Khan. He is not even Attila. He is a man with a refugee crisis on his hands. 100,000 people who need food, shelter, and safety before winter kills them all. He doesn't want Castle Black as a trophy. He wants it as a base of operations. He sends ravens immediately. This is the action nobody expects from a wildling king. Ravens, the tools of the civilization he has been fighting. But Mance spent years in that civilization. He knows how it works. He knows that the ravens are the nervous system of the realm, and that controlling what information flows south is as important as any military victory. He sends ravens to every lord he can reach with a single message in the clearest possible terms. The wall has fallen. The dead are coming. We did not come south to make war on the living. We came south because we had no choice. The Night's Watch knows what walks in the dark. Ask them. Then he summons Jon Snow. Jon Snow, prisoner and asset Jon, is brought before Mance with his ribs bound and his hands free. Mance made that decision deliberately because binding a man's hands is a statement about power, and Mance doesn't need to make that statement. He already has it. They look at each other across the table in Castle Black's great hall, the same table where Jon sat as a steward, where he ate his meals and read his assignments and tried to understand a world that didn't quite fit the shape he'd been given for it. "You fought well," Mance says. "Not well enough," Jon says. "No, but well." A pause. "You know what's coming, north of the wall." "Yes." "Then you know this?" A gesture around the hall. "It's the castle, the open gate, is the least of your problems." Jon looks at him for a long moment. And here is where Jon Snow makes the decision that will define the rest of this alternate timeline. In the original story, Jon's relationship with the free folk is built slowly, over seasons, through captivity and choice and love and loss. He comes to understand them gradually. In our timeline, he understands them already. He lived with them. He loved one of them. He knows that Mance is right, that the wall falling to the living is a catastrophe. But the wall being breached by the dead would be the end of everything. "What do you want from me?" Jon asks. "A guide," Mance says. "Someone who knows the South, who knows its lords and its laws and its particular way of doing things." A pause. And someone the Southerners won't immediately try to kill when they see us coming." Jon Snow looks at the man who commanded the army that just killed half his brothers. He thinks of Ygritte. He thinks of Gren and Pip and all the men who died in the dark. He thinks of the things he saw beyond the wall, the army of the dead, the walkers moving through the snow like gods of winter. "I'll help you," he says, "but there are terms. 100,000 souls. Think about what it means to move 100,000 people, not an army. An army is simple. You point it at something and you feed it, and you keep it moving. 100,000 people is a civilization in motion. It is the elderly who cannot walk fast and must be carried. It is children who don't understand why they are moving, but scream from cold and hunger and the particular terror of a world that won't hold still. It is livestock, the few animals the wildlings manage to bring. Goats, horses, the occasional aurochs that someone domesticated out of sheer northern stubbornness. It is the memories and the traditions and the oral histories of a dozen different tribes who have never agreed on anything except that they were all free. Mance Rayder moves them through the gate in waves, families first, children and elderly and pregnant women, then the tribal groups in an order negotiated with each clan leader through a combination of argument, compromise, and the occasional shouting match that resolves nothing but at least releases pressure. Then the fighters. The wildlings stream through the tunnel under the wall and emerge on the southern side and stand blinking in the gray light of a northern morning, looking at a world they have never seen but have always known was there. The land south of the wall is not dramatically different from the land north of it. It is still boreal forest and gray sky and frozen ground. But there are roads. There are ruins of abandoned settlements. There are the traces of a civilization that went somewhere else, that retreated south generation by generation as the long autumn settled in and the wall's garrison shrank to nothing. Tormund Giantsbane, who is Mance's second in the ways that matter, not by title, because the free folk don't do titles, but by respect and by the fact that people do what he says, rides through the gate and stops his horse and looks south and says, "Bigger than I expected." "It's just the start," one of the watch survivors says, a young steward named Ollie, who has attached himself to the group of survivors with a particular focus of a boy who has lost everything and is converting grief into purpose. "Show me a map," Tormund says. Jon Snow shows him a map. The tribal question. Here is one of the most fascinating complications of our divergent timeline. The free folk are not a unified people. They are a coalition, fragile, fractious, held together by Mance's charisma and the shared terror of what is coming from the north. The moment they cross the wall, the coalition begins to strain. The Thenns, under Styr, disciplined, cannibalistic by Wildling standards, deeply uncomfortable to be around, want to push south immediately, take villages, establish territory. The Thenns have a very clear model for how conquest works, and they are not particularly interested in diplomatic nuance. Tormund's people are more pragmatic. They are fighters who have spent their lives in survival mode, and survival mode means reading the environment and adapting. They can see that pushing south aggressively, burning villages, killing small folk, will unite every lord in the north against them faster than anything else could. 100,000 people need allies, or at least non-enemies. You don't make non-enemies by eating their neighbors. Mance has to manage this tension from the first day. He does it the way he always does everything, through the particular alchemy of personality that makes people feel heard without necessarily getting what they want. He tells the Thenns that they will have territory, that there is enough land south of the wall, abandoned and empty, to house every tribe twice over. He tells Tormund that they need to move faster, further south, before the weather closes in. He tells Jon Snow, privately, that he has perhaps 2 weeks before the coalition begins to fracture along its natural seams. 2 weeks to do what? Jon asks. Make contact with someone south who can give us legitimacy. Someone the northern lords will listen to. Someone who can be the face of this that isn't me. Jon thinks about who that might be. The obvious answer is Stannis Baratheon, who is sailing for the wall right now with an army. But Stannis is unpredictable, and his version of help comes with the price of submission. And the free folk will not submit to anyone, not after 8,000 years of specifically refusing to do exactly that. The less obvious answer is more interesting. I know someone, Jon says, but we'll need to move fast. Rose Bolton receives bad news. Let us take a moment to appreciate the particular quality of Rose Bolton receiving bad news. He is, in many ways, the anti-Tywin Lannister, where Tywin is cold and calculating and controlled. Rose is cold and calculating and hollow, like someone built a very convincing suit of armor and forgot to put a person inside. He receives the raven from Castle Black, Mance's raven, which is a piece of audacity that Rose actually pauses to acknowledge, because only a former Maester's steward would think to use the raven system to announce his own invasion, and reads it twice, slowly, in the Great Hall of Winterfell. Then he reads the second raven, from a scout he had stationed near the Night Fort, confirming that the wall's gate is open and the wildlings are moving south in numbers that the scout describes as like a river made of people. Ramsay Bolton, his bastard, his creature, his worst feature made flesh, is sitting across the table gnawing on a chicken leg with the focused pleasure of a man who enjoys everything a little too much. He watches his father read. He waits. How many? Ramsay asks. The scout says 100,000. He may be exaggerating. Or not. Or not. Rose sets down the raven. This changes things. Ramsay tilts his head. Does it? They're savages. We have walls. We have Winterfell, Rose says, with the particular flatness that means he is about to explain something Ramsay should already understand. We have a castle. We do not have an army sufficient to hold the north against 100,000 people who have nothing to lose and nowhere to go back to. The wildlings are not raiding. They are not a border incursion. They are a migration, and migrations cannot be stopped by walls. He stands. He walks to the window. Winterfell in winter, the gray courtyards, the smoke from the forge. We need allies, he says, and we need them before the Wildlings reach us. Who? Ramsay asks. Stannis is coming from the south. The other northern lords hate us. We murdered their king in the north at a wedding. Who exactly do we appeal to? Rose turns from the window, and for the first time in this scene, something moves behind the pale eyes. Something that might, in a different face, be read as fear. We appeal to whoever arrives first, he says, and we make ourselves useful. The Northern Lord's dilemma. The other Northern Lords, the Karstarks, the Mormonts, the Umbers, the Glovers, the Manderleys, are in a complicated position. The Red Wedding destroyed the coalition that Robb Stark had built. These families are not united. Many of them bent the knee to the Boltons grudgingly, under threat, because the alternative was the Lannister army. They do not love the Boltons. They do not trust the Boltons. But they have submitted, and in the North, submission is structural. It holds until something breaks it. The fall of the wall is something that breaks it. Not because the Northern Lords suddenly feel warmly toward wildlings. They don't. They have generations of border conflict to draw on. And the wildling raids that destroyed villages and took slaves are not abstract historical facts, but living memory in many families. But because the fall of the wall changes the political calculus entirely, the Boltons cannot protect the North. The Boltons barely hold Winterfell. What the North needs in this moment is leadership. Real leadership. The kind that can respond to a crisis of this magnitude. Lord Wyman Manderley of White Harbor. Fat, seemingly jovial, secretly the most politically sophisticated man in the North. Secretly burning with a hatred of the Boltons that he has been banking for the right moment, sends a raven to every Northern Lord he can reach. The message is carefully, brilliantly ambiguous. The times call for a council. White Harbor stands ready to host. Come armed, come in strength, come prepared to speak plainly. Plainly. In a world of ravens and coded language and plausible deniability, that word, plainly, is a declaration of intent. Stannis Baratheon arrives. Early. Stannis Baratheon, the most technically correct king alive, receives the news of the wall's fall, while his fleet is still 3 days from shore. He receives it and does not shout. He does not curse. He stands on the deck of his ship in the gray northern sea and looks at the horizon and does something that his advisors find, honestly, that is more frightening than shouting. He smiles. Not a warm smile. Nothing about Stannis is warm, but a smile of grim, satisfied vindication. Stannis has spent years, telling people that the real threat was in the North. That the war for the Iron Throne was a distraction from the war that actually mattered. He has been ignored, dismissed, patronized. Melisandre has been his only consistent supporter, and her support comes with the particular discomfort of being believed in by someone whose methods you find alarming. We make for shore, he says, not Eastwatch, the wall's eastern end, wherever the ice is thinnest. We land, we march, we get to Castle Black before the wildlings can consolidate. Davos Seaworth, who has been serving Stannis long enough to know when to argue and when to simply ask the clarifying question. And what do we do when we get there, Your Grace? There are 100,000 wildlings between us and Castle Black. There are 100,000 wildlings who need food, shelter, and protection from something far worse than us, Stannis says. We offer them that, in exchange for bending the knee. They won't bend the knee, Davos says. They've never bent the knee. It's rather their defining characteristic. Then we negotiate, Stannis says. I can be reasonable when reason serves the purpose. Davos looks at him for a long moment. With respect, Your Grace, when has reason ever served your purpose before? Stannis looks at him. There's always a first time. In Davos, the ride south. Jon Snow rides south from Castle Black on the third day after the fall with a small party. Tormund Giantsbane, because any negotiation requires someone the free folk will respect. Ghost, his direwolf, because Ghost goes where Jon goes. And 3 surviving brothers of the Night's Watch who volunteered, because Jon insisted on having at least some black cloaks present, so that whoever he meets doesn't think he's entirely gone over. He is riding toward White Harbor. It's a long ride, the better part of a week, through country that is half abandoned, through villages where the small folk have locked their doors and are watching from behind shuttered windows with a particular northern face that means, we've seen trouble before. Ace will see it again, we'll wait. He stops at each village. This is not in any plan Mance gave him. This is Jon Snow doing what Jon Snow does, noticing the human cost of large events, refusing to abstract people into strategic assets. He stops, and he talks to the headmen, and he tells them the truth. The wall has fallen. The wildlings are moving south. They are not here to raid or burn or kill. They are refugees from something worse than anything any of these villages have ever seen. The war is not with the free folk. The war is coming behind them. Most of the headmen look at him with the same expression. They believe him about the wildlings, but they don't believe him about the thing behind them. Not yet. The White Walkers are myth, stories told to frighten children. No one south of the wall has seen them. Jon doesn't push it. He plants the seed and moves on. Tormund watches this and says, on the third night, over a fire in the ruins of a mill, you're trying to build something. I'm trying to stop something, Jon says. Same thing. You can't stop anything without building something first. You need walls. Walls need people. People need to trust you. A pause. Do they? Trust you? Jon looks at the fire. I don't know yet. The ones in the villages, the ones with the closed doors, they were watching you. Some of them came out after. Tormund pokes at the fire with a stick. That's something. Arrival at White Harbor. White Harbor is the only proper city in the north, a functioning port, a merchant hub, a walls and docks, and the kind of organized urban life that the rest of the north regards with a mixture of envy and northern suspicion toward anything that resembles the south. Lord Wyman Manderley received them at the gate himself, which is a statement about the seriousness with which he is taking the situation. Wyman Manderley is enormous, cheerful in the way of men who have learned to weaponize cheerfulness, and absolutely ruthless in ways that most people who focus on the enormous and cheerful parts fail to notice. He looks at Jon Snow and Tormund Giantsbane standing side by side at his gate, and he says, with perfect composure, I had hoped someone sensible would arrive eventually. Come in. The lords are already arguing. They started before they even unpacked their horses. The council in White Harbor is attended by representatives of 12 northern houses. The Umbers came, Hother Umber, called Horsebane, who is old and hard and has no patience for nonsense. The Glovers came. The Mormonts sent Lady Mage's eldest daughter, a young woman named Alysain, who looks exactly like someone you don't want to be on the wrong side of. The Manderleys are the hosts. Several smaller houses sent stewards with instructions to report back, which is the political equivalent of being interested but not yet committed. The Boltons did not come. Rose sent a raven of regret and a plausible excuse. Everyone in the room knows what it means. Jon Snow walks into this council, and for a moment, the room goes quiet. Because Jon Snow, in this moment, is not just a crow or a bastard or a Night's Watch brother. He is the only person in this room who has walked on both sides of the wall. He is the only person who has fought beside the free folk and against them. He is the person who looked Mance Rayder in the eye 3 days ago and came away with a living agreement rather than a sword in his side. He tells them what he saw north of the wall. He tells them about the army of the dead. He tells them about the Night King. He tells them that Mance Rayder did not come south to conquer the north, but to survive what is coming behind him, and that what is coming behind him will not care whether you are a wildling or a northerner or a lord or a bastard. He tells them that the wall falling to the living is, in the long run, less dangerous than the wall falling to the dead. The room argues for 3 hours. Of course it does. These are northern lords. They do not accept conclusions quickly. They test every angle, and they find the weak spots, and they argue about history, and they reference grievances going back 4 generations, and eventually, exhausted, they come to the thing they knew they were going to come to from the moment they heard the ravens. They need to deal with the wildlings, and then they need to deal with the Boltons, and then they need to deal with the dead. In that order. Claiming the abandoned lands. There is a fact about the North that the show gestures at but never fully develops. It is vast, and much of it is empty. Not all of it. There are farming communities and fishing villages and the larger holdings of the great houses. But north of Winterfell, west of the King's Road, east of the mountains, There are enormous tracts of land that have been depopulated by decades of failed harvests, long autumns, and the general drift of people toward the relative safety of larger settlements. Mance Rayder knows this. He mapped the North obsessively during his years as a crow, and he has been adding to that map for decades since. He knows where the empty land is. He knows where the rivers run and where the soil is deep enough to farm and where the forests can be harvested for timber without destroying the hunting grounds. He doesn't move his people randomly south. He moves them strategically into the spaces the North has left open. The gift, the land just south of the wall that was originally granted to the Night's Watch, is first. It has been largely abandoned for years. The Watch didn't have the men to farm it or defend it. The Wildlings take it without conflict because there is no one to conflict with. Then the further lands. The Wildlings spread into the area between the Gift and the Umber territories, carefully with Mance's explicit instructions that any settlement that is already occupied is to be approached through Jon Snow's diplomatic channels, not through force. The Thens break this instruction twice in the first week. The first time, Mance deals with it through negotiation and restitution. The second time, he deals with it through the particular directness that comes from being a man who has ruled 100,000 people through personality alone. He rides to the Then camp himself, dismounts, walks up to Styre, and tells him in front of his entire tribe that if it happens a third time, the Thens will be settled in the most remote, cold, inaccessible corner of the Gift, away from everyone else, for the duration. Styre is not a man who accepts humiliation easily, but he is also not a man who can fight a direct confrontation with Mance without losing the tribe's respect. He accepts it. The second major tension is about food. 100,000 people arriving before winter is a food crisis regardless of how peacefully they settle. The lands they're taking are empty, partly because they can't support large populations through a northern winter. Mance knew this. He planned for it. He sent raiding parties south in the months before the main migration, caching food supplies in various locations. But the caches are not enough. This is where the deal with the Northern Lords becomes not just politically important, but existentially necessary. The Great Bargain. The negotiations between Mance Rayder and the Northern Lords, mediated by Jon Snow, attended by Stannis Baratheon as an observer who cannot quite stop himself from occasionally making suggestions. Take 10 days and produce a document that no one is entirely happy with, which is the correct sign that a negotiation has been successful. The terms, roughly, the free folk will settle in specific territories north and west of Winterfell, in lands designated by the Council. They will not raid settled northern communities. They will respect the existing land rights of Northern Lords within those boundaries. In exchange, the Northern Lords will provide emergency food stores for the first winter, not charity, but a debt to be repaid in labor and materials as the wildling settlements establish themselves. The free folk will contribute fighters to the common defense of the North, under a joint command structure to be determined, with Jon Snow as the liaison between the two forces. Stannis Baratheon observes all of this with the expression of a man watching a foreign custom that he finds both fascinating and slightly disturbing. When it is concluded, and he pulls Jon Snow aside and says, "You've just created a new northern kingdom. I've created an alliance," Jon says. In practice, that's the same thing. Those people are never leaving. No, Jon agrees, they're not. The land north of the wall is lost. Whatever comes down from there, they can't go back. Stannis considers this. And you're comfortable with that? Wildlings in the north permanently? Jon looks at him. My lord, I lived with them for months. They're not savages. They're people who've been fighting for their lives for 8,000 years against something the rest of us refuse to believe existed. The least we can do is give them somewhere to stand. Stannis is quiet. Then, you sound like your father. Which one? Jon asks. And Stannis, who knows the answer, who received Ned Stark's letter about his brother's campaign in the south, who has his own suspicions about Jon's parentage that he has never voiced because he is Stannis. And Stannis does not speculate aloud, says nothing at all. Rose Bolton's calculation. Let us understand what Rose Bolton has in this timeline at the moment the Wildlings cross the wall. He has Winterfell, the greatest castle in the north, symbol of northern identity, ancestral seat of the Starks. He has it by treachery and murder, Most of the North's lords know this on some level, and the ones who bent the knee did so because they had no choice, not because they were convinced. He has Ramsay, a weapon, effective and terrifying and almost entirely uncontrollable, who is currently entertaining himself with Theon Greyjoy in the dungeons of Winterfell in ways that Rose finds both useful and faintly distasteful. Ramsay is good at destroying things. He is not good at building them. He has an army, not the full Lannister support he enjoyed briefly, because the Lannisters have their own problems in the south, and the north is peripheral to their concerns now. Just his own Bolton forces, supplemented by houses sworn to him by fear. And he has a problem. The legitimacy he purchased with the Red Wedding is dissolving in real time. The Raven from Castle Black, the Council at White Harbor, which specifically did not invite him, Jon Snow riding south with a wildling at his side, building alliances that don't include Roose Bolton. He does what Roose Bolton always does. He calculates. Option 1, declare for the Wildlings. Offer Mance Rayder Winterfell's resources in exchange for protection and a place in whatever new Northern Order emerges. This is humiliating and also dangerous. Mance is not stupid, and submitting to a wildling king makes Roose irrelevant immediately. Option 2, declare for Stannis. Stannis is a Baratheon, which means Roose would be trading one foreign overlord for another. But Stannis is at least a known quantity, a king who rules by law, who might be worked with. Option 3, declare for no one, and use the chaos to strengthen his own position. Roose is a patient man. He can wait. He chooses, as Roose Bolton always chooses, the option that is most patient and most ruthless simultaneously. He does nothing visible. He secures Winterfell. He calls in every favor, every sword owed to him, every house that has bent the knee. He prepares for siege, and he sends Ramsay north, not to fight, but to watch, to report, to gather intelligence. Ramsay as a scout is like using a flamethrower to light a candle, but Roose doesn't have better options. This is a mistake. Roose Bolton knows it is a mistake the moment he makes it. But he makes it anyway, because Ramsay is the most effective tool he has, and effective tools get used. Ramsay in the field. Ramsay Bolton, released from Winterfell's walls with a small company of his own men, his bastards' boys, loyal to him in the particular way of people who have been chosen and elevated by someone frightening. Rides north with the ostensible mission of reconnaissance. What he actually does is demonstrate, with crystal clarity, why Roose should never have sent him. He encounters a wildling scouting party of 7 people, 3 fighters, 2 women, 2 children, near a burned-out village 2 days north of Winterfell. The wildlings are doing exactly what Mance told them to do, moving peacefully, causing no conflict, scouting territory that has been designated for settlement. Ramsay kills 4 of them. He lets 3 go, deliberately, because Ramsay likes the thought of witnesses, and he does things to the village that I will not describe in detail, but that will be reported to Mance Rayder within 36 hours. Mance's reaction is cold and immediate, not rage. Mance has spent decades not having the luxury of rage, but decision, clean and irreversible. The Boltons did this, he tells his council. Tormund, the Thenn leaders, or the various clan chiefs who form his governing circle. Not the North, the Boltons. We make sure everyone knows the difference. He sends word to Jon Snow, and Jon Snow, who is at White Harbor when the message arrives, who reads it and feels something cold settle in his chest, sends word to Stannis. Stannis' response, received within a day, is 3 words. I'll handle it. Enidibor. Yo sixtand wanidi. Esbi. The Alliance marches. The force that marches on Winterfell in this timeline is unlike any military force in Northern history. At its head rides Stannis Baratheon, technically, because Stannis has an army and a claim and a very strong opinion about his own centrality. Beside him rides Jon Snow, a guy who has no formal title but whose practical authority in this alliance is substantial. Behind them, Stannis' army of 4,000, hardened Southerners and sellswords, and the devoted veterans of Dragonstone, 2,000 Northern fighters from the council houses, Umbers and Mormonts and Glovers and Manderly spearmen in white and blue, and 3,000 wildling warriors under Tormund Giantsboning, who rides with the energy of a man who has been waiting for a fight that meant something. 9,000 people, roughly. Winterfell, in this timeline, has perhaps 2,000 defenders. Some of those defenders are fighting men sworn to Bolton. Some of them are servants and small folk who are there because they live there and have nowhere else to go. The numbers favor the Alliance overwhelmingly, but Roose Bolton has walls. The Siege Winterfell's walls are ancient and thick, not impregnable. Nothing is impregnable given enough time and enough determination. But they are the kind of walls that make attackers think carefully about the cost of a direct assault. Stannis, who has sieged castles before and has the professional's deep dislike for sieges that drag on past their useful life, sets up his camp outside the walls and begins the methodical work of strangulation. Cut the supply lines, prevent ravens from leaving. Wait, Jon Snow has a different approach in mind, and this is where the timeline produces its most unexpected development. Theon Greyjoy. Inside the walls. Theon, what remains of Theon, Ramsay's creature Reek, the broken thing that used to be the ward of Winterfell, is inside those walls. He has been inside them for months, reduced to a shadow of the person he was, stripped of identity and self and name. He is not a fighter. He is barely a person in the way that personhood requires a self to anchor itself to. But he knows Winterfell. He was raised there. He knows the secret passages and the forgotten doors and the patterns of the guard rotations that haven't changed since the Starks held it, because Roose never bothered to change them. Why would he, since they worked perfectly well? Jon doesn't know Theon is inside Winterfell, but someone does. Wyman Manderley, who has been playing a longer game than anyone realizes, who has had informants inside Winterfell for months, who has been waiting for exactly this moment, sends a single message through a channel so obscure that even Rose's intelligence network missed it. The message reaches a servant inside Winterfell. The servant reaches Theon. The message says, "The North remembers. The gate on the east side. Midnight." What happens at midnight is a chapter in Northern history that the stories will argue about for generations. Theon Greyjoy, Reek, broken and terrified, finds something underneath the breaking. Some root of self that Ramsay couldn't reach because it was too quiet, too buried, too much the part of him that actually loved Winterfell rather than wanted to own it. He opens the East Gate, the fall of Roose Bolton. The battle inside Winterfell's walls is brief and ugly and decisive. Roose had prepared for a siege, not for enemies already inside. His forces are split between the walls, where they're waiting for an assault that isn't coming from that direction, and the interior, where Tormund's fighters and Jon's northern contingent are coming through the East Gate in the dark. Roose Bolton, to his credit, fights. He is not a coward. He is not a man who runs when the walls close in. He fights in the Great Hall of Winterfell. Ned Stark's Great Hall, the Stark Hall with its banners and its ancient stone and its history that has nothing to do with the flayed man of House Bolton. And he fights well for a man of his age against Jon Snow. They meet blade to blade in the place where once the Starks sat at feasts, where Bran used to climb the walls, and Arya used to slide down the banister, and Robb used to practice his lordly gravity. Jon Snow, who grew up in this hall as a bastard, who ate here and laughed here and felt the particular ache of belonging somewhere that doesn't fully claim you, Jon Snow, in this hall, finishes it. Roose Bolton dies in Winterfell's Great Hall, cleanly, quickly, which is more than he deserved, more than he gave Robb Stark, but Jon Snow is not in the business of cruelty. That was never what he was for. Ramsay's end. Ramsay is not in Winterfell when it falls. He is still out in the field, the reconnaissance mission that was never really reconnaissance, which means he receives the news of his father's death by Raven from a servant who fled through a postern gate before the East Gate fell. Ramsay Bolton, alone in a field camp with his bastard's boys, reads the message, and then he does something that surprises even the men who have followed him into cruelty for years. He laughs. It is not a sane laugh. It is the laugh of a man for whom consequences have always been other people's problems, and who cannot quite process that they have become his. He looks at his men, 12 of them, scarred and loyal in the way of people who have participated in too much together to separate now. And he says, "We go south." South? One of them asks. To what? To anything, Ramsay says. There's always something. There's always someone who needs what we can do. He rides south. He disappears from the northern story for a while. He will come back. Men like Ramsay always come back, because the world is not short of people who find uses for them. But not here, not yet. The Wildling army, specifically a detachment of Tormund's fighters who have been told about what happened near that burned-out village, finds Ramsay's camp 3 days later, finds it and the evidence of what he did before he rode south, and tracks him with the particular patience and skill of people who have spent generations hunting things in the cold. Ramsay Bolton is run to ground in a burned-out holdfast 200 miles south of Winterfell. The end is not poetic. It is not cinematic. It is simply an end in the cold, far from any castle, with no one watching and no one to impress. Who sits in Winterfell? This is the question that immediately follows the battle. The walls are intact, the Boltons are gone, and there is a castle that belongs to no one. Or rather, to everyone, which is in politics almost the same thing. Stannis Baratheon believes, with the total conviction of a man who has decided what is right and is now waiting for the universe to catch up, that Winterfell should be held in his name as King of Westeros. He has a claim. He has an army. He won this battle. Jon Snow looks at him and says, with the particular directness that makes Stannis oddly respect him despite everything, "This is a Stark seat. It belongs to a Stark." "There are no Starks," Stannis says. "Robb is dead. Bran and Rickon are believed dead." "Believed," Jon says. "Not confirmed." Silence. "And you?" Stannis asks. "You're Ned Stark's son, by his own account." Jon looks at him for a long moment. "I am the commander of the Night's Watch's liaison to the Free Folk and the man who brokered the Northern Alliance. I am not claiming Winterfell." Stannis studies him. He has the look of a man adding numbers that keep producing an unexpected result. "You know something," he says, "about yourself. It's something you're not telling me." "Everyone knows something they're not telling you," Jon says. "That's not unusual. With most people, no. With you..." Stannis stops. He is not a man who pursues lines of inquiry that he isn't ready to act on. "Very well. Winterfell remains an open question, for now. The Starks return." Here is one of the most emotionally resonant developments of our entire theory. In the original timeline, Sansa Stark's return to Winterfell is part of the Boltons' political game, stage-managed and controlled. In our timeline, it is something entirely different. Sansa is still in the Vale with Littlefinger when Winterfell falls. She receives the news by Raven, not the public account, but the private one, from a source Littlefinger doesn't know about. All because Wyman Manderly's intelligence network is better than anyone gives it credit for. She reads that the Boltons have fallen, that Winterfell is held by Jon Snow and Stannis Baratheon and a council of Northern Lords, that someone opened the East Gate from inside. She reads that Theon Greyjoy is alive, broken but alive. She makes her decision in approximately 40 seconds. "I'm going north," she tells Littlefinger. Littlefinger smiles his particular smile. He has been managing Sansa for months, shaping her, teaching her the game in the way of a man who mistakes the student for a project rather than a person. He has plans for Sansa that involve the Vale and the Northern Claim, and a very long game that he has been playing since before she was born. "Of course," he says. "I'll arrange..." "Alone," she says. Or with my own party, not yours." The smile goes very still, and Sansa Stark, who has been a hostage and a pawn and a victim and a student, who has learned the game in the hardest possible school, meets his eyes and holds them without flinching. She is 16 years old and she has been remade by everything that happened to her, and she is done being managed. "I see," Littlefinger says after a moment. "You've grown." "Everyone does," she says. "Eventually." She rides north with 20 knights of the Vale who are loyal to her, not to Littlefinger, to her, to the Lady of Winterfell who is going home. She arrives at Winterfell 2 weeks after the battle. Jon is in the yard when she rides through the gate. He looks up. She looks down at him from her horse. There is a very long silence. "Jon," she says. "Sansa," he says. Then she dismounts and they embrace in the yard of Winterfell, and there is nothing political about it, nothing managed or performed. Just two children of that house, children of the North, standing in the snow in the seat of their family, alive when they had no particular right to be alive, holding on. Bran Stark, it emerges later, is alive. He is north of the Wall, deeper north, on his strange journey to the three-eyed raven that no change in timeline can prevent because it is written into something more fundamental than politics. He will come back in time. Rickon Stark is found in the care of the Umbers, alive, wild-eyed, accompanied by his direwolf Shaggy Dog, younger and more feral than anyone remembered him being. He is brought to Winterfell, and he stands in the Great Hall and looks at everything with the expression of a child who has been living rough for too long and isn't entirely sure the walls are real. Sansa kneels down and opens her arms. He goes to her with the particular boneless abandon of a child who has been holding himself together through sheer stubbornness, and finally, doesn't have to anymore. Arya is not there. Arya is still on her own path, the path that takes her to Braavos and the House of Black and White, and the long education in the art of becoming no one. Her absence is its own kind of presence. There is a space at every table in Winterfell's hall that waits for her. She will fill it eventually, on her own terms, in her own time. Thar the South's reaction. King's Landing receives the news from the North, the way it receives all bad news from the North. Late, incomplete, and filtered through the particular lens of a Southern court that has never quite taken the North seriously. Cersei Lannister reads the reports. The Wall fallen, the Wildlings settled, the Boltons destroyed, Winterfell reclaimed by the Starks. And her immediate reaction is not strategic. It is personal. Another house risen against the Lannisters. Another piece of the realm slipping from their control. Tywin Lannister is dead in this timeline. Tyrion killed him. As in the original story, that particular tragedy is not something our northern divergence can touch. And without Tywin, Cersei's hold on power is what it always was without him. Politically skilled but emotionally driven, capable of brilliance and catastrophic overreach in equal measure. She convenes a small council. The small council in this period is not inspiring. It is a collection of men who are either afraid of her or working against her. And the resulting advice is either useless or actively dangerous. The North is effectively independent, her current hand says carefully. The Boltons were our instrument there. Without them, the North has always been a problem, Cersei says. This is not a new problem. It is a somewhat larger problem than before, he says. There are wildlings living in the North now, permanently, and Stannis Baratheon is somewhere in the North. Which means he is alive and has an army and... Stannis, Cersei says, with the flat contempt of someone who has been saying that name with contempt for so long, it has lost all other content. Stannis is always somewhere, always threatening, always failing to follow through. He is not my primary concern. This is a mistake. Cersei makes many mistakes, but dismissing Stannis Baratheon at this particular moment is among her larger ones, because Stannis in this timeline has done something Stannis never quite managed in the original. He has won something. He participated in the victory at Winterfell. He has a foothold in the North, a relationship with the Northern Lords, and the particular credibility boost that comes from being associated with a military success. He is not Ned Stark. The North doesn't love him, but they respect him. And in the North, respect is worth more than love anyway. The Tyrell complication. The Tyrells, meanwhile, are watching the North with the quiet attention of people who have always played a longer game than anyone gives them credit for. Margaery Tyrell, married to Joffrey in the original story, married to Tommen after Joffrey's death, is in King's Landing being navigated through the complicated machinery of being queen consort to a boy king, while her grandmother Olenna manages the actual politics. Lady Olenna, the Queen of Thorns, the sharpest mind in the Seven Kingdoms, receives a private summary of the northern situation from her own intelligence network and makes a note. Sansa Stark is alive. Sansa Stark is at Winterfell. Sansa Stark has Littlefinger's education in politics, but not Littlefinger's loyalty to no one. And Sansa Stark is the eldest surviving daughter of the family that Robert Baratheon admired above all others. And any settlement of the northern question will require either her cooperation or her neutralization. Olenna prefers cooperation. Neutralization is so final, and it tends to produce unforeseen consequences. She sends her own raven to Winterfell, addressed to Sansa. The message is short. I knew your mother. She was remarkable. You appear to be more so. When the time comes for negotiations, I hope we are on the same side of the table. O.T. Sansa reads it and smiles. It is a small smile, private, the kind she has learned not to show to anyone who might use it against her. "Who is this?" Jon asks, reading over her shoulder. "An ally, I think," she says. "Maybe, if I'm careful." "In my experience," Jon says, the ones who say, 'I knew your mother,' always want something." "Everyone wants something," Sansa says. "The question is what they're offering in exchange." She folds the letter and keeps it. She will need it later. Littlefinger's final move. Petter Baelish. Littlefinger, the man who started the War of the Five Kings as a hobby and a power grab. The man who has been climbing toward a goal that is partly about power, and mostly in the most pathetically human way, about a girl who looked like a woman he loved 20 years ago, has not given up. He arrives at Winterfell 6 weeks after Sansa, with the smooth confidence of a man who has never accepted that his invitation has been withdrawn. He has the Vale's military power behind him, nominally. He is the Lord Protector of the Vale, or in charge of Robin Arryn's forces, and he has the intelligence network and the financial resources and the lifetime of political experience. He is met at the gate by Jon Snow. Jon, who has heard about Littlefinger from everyone who knew him, who has pieced together the picture of the man from a dozen different accounts, who is not charmed by charm or intimidated by sophistication. "Lord Baelish," Jon says, with a particular northern courtesy that is identical in tone to a door closing. "Lord Commander," Littlefinger says, or, "Forgive me, you've stepped down from the watch, haven't you? I'm not sure what to call you." "Jon is fine," Jon says. "What do you want?" The directness briefly disrupts Littlefinger's equilibrium. He is used to conversations that give him room to maneuver. "I've come to assist in the reconstruction of the North. The Vale has resources that—" "Lady Sansa will see you in the Great Hall," Jon says. "She's been expecting you." He has not been managing the conversation. This was Sansa's instruction. She told Jon exactly where to bring Littlefinger and exactly what to say. Littlefinger walks into the Great Hall of Winterfell and finds not a girl he can manage, but a young woman sitting in the seat of her family with the Council of Northern Lords on her left and Jon Snow on her right, with Wyman Manderly's enormous presence at the far end of the table. The meeting is brief. The outcome is not what Littlefinger planned. He leaves the North with his title intact and his influence substantially curtailed, because Sansa Stark has done the thing that no one in King's Landing ever quite managed. She has made herself unnecessary to him. She has the North. She has the Alliance. She has the Stark name and the loyalty it commands and the backing of people who actually like her, rather than people he controls. He goes back to the Vale. He is not finished. Littlefinger is never finished. But in the North, his chapter is done. The price of the open wall. Winter comes. Real winter, the kind that the Seven Kingdoms have been dreading for years, the kind that Ned Stark was always warning about, the kind that children grow up hearing about as a myth that older people insist is real. It comes hard and it comes fast. And the North, which is at least prepared for it in the structural sense, which has been storing food and cutting timber and doing all the things that generations of Northerners have done, feels it immediately. The Wildlings, whose settlements are still new and not fully insulated, feel it worse. This is where the Alliance is tested in the way that only genuine hardship tests things. It is easy to ally when the enemy is another army of men. It is harder to ally against winter itself, against cold that kills quietly and without malice or drama, that simply removes heat from living bodies until the bodies stop. Mance Rayder, who has been managing people in exactly this kind of cold for his entire life, is in his element. He knows which shelter designs work and which ones kill their occupants through carbon monoxide buildup. He knows which preserved foods last and which ones lie about it. He knows how to keep 1,000 people warm when the fuel runs low. And the answer involves body heat in very close quarters and setting aside several tribal distinctions that would have been unthinkable 6 months ago. Jon Snow moves between the northern settlements and the Wildling camps with the tirelessness of someone who has slept rough in worse conditions and survived. He is not the political leader of this alliance. Sansa holds that role in Winterfell, with the Northern Lords' formal deference, if not always their agreement. He is not the military leader. Stannis, who has remained north longer than most of his advisors think is wise, holds enough formal authority that the combined forces defer to him. Jon is something else, something harder to categorize. He is the person everyone trusts, which, in a fragile alliance between two peoples who have been enemies for generations, is the most important thing anyone can be. The first signs. The signs come from north of the wall. They come in the reports of Night's Watch survivors who have been posted at various points along the wall's length, watching the open gate with the particular alertness of people who know exactly what they're watching for. Cold that moves like weather, but is not weather. Wind that smells of something ancient and wrong. Animals dead without apparent cause, found in circles that the survivors refuse to describe in detail. And then, bodies. Dead men, wildlings who had stayed north of the wall too long, found at the edge of the gift, with eyes that have been blue and are now merely dead. Each lying in the exact positions of men who fought something and lost. Jon receives the reports and brings them to the council. He has been expecting this. He has been dreading it and expecting it and preparing for it simultaneously. The way you prepare for something that you know is real and that no one else quite believes in yet. The army of the dead, he says, in Winterfell's great hall, with every lord of the north and Mance Rayder and Stannis Baratheon in attendance. It is moving south. It has been moving south since before the wall fell. The wall was the only thing slowing it down. He lays the reports on the table. He describes in the measured tone of someone who learned a long time ago that graphic description provokes denial rather than acceptance. What the White Walkers are and what they do. The room is quiet in a way that rooms rarely are. The quiet of people processing something too large to fit in the ordinary containers of thought. Mance speaks first. Of course he does. He has been waiting for this conversation for years. "I told you," he says, not triumphantly. There is no triumph in being right about something this terrible. "I told everyone I could find who would listen. This is why we came south, not to raid, not to conquer, this." Stannis, who believes in one God and that God's particular vendetta against the darkness, straightens in his chair with the look of a man whose entire life has been building toward a specific purpose. "Then we defend," he says. "We organize, we prepare." "With what?" Lord Umber asks. "Our swords aren't going to do much against dragon glass," Jon says, "and Valyrian steel, for those who have it, and fire," he looks at the room, "and unity. Because the dead don't negotiate. They don't get tired. They don't go home when winter ends. The only thing that has ever stopped them before was the wall and the Night's Watch. The wall is open and the Night's Watch is 40 men. That means it's us." He looks around the table, at Mance Rayder, who brought 100,000 people south to survive this. At Sansa, who holds the North's political heart. At Stannis, who has been wrong about many things, but is not wrong about the nature of this enemy. At the lords who fought each other for years and are now sitting in the same hall breathing the same cold air. "Together," he says, "or not at all. The alliance for the long night." What happens next is not a battle scene. It is not cinematic in the way of swords and fire and dramatic last stands. It is the unglamorous, essential work of building a defensive coalition out of people who have every reason to distrust each other in the middle of a winter that wants to kill them all. Jon sends ravens south to every lord he can reach, to the Tullys in the Riverlands, to the Arryns in the Vale, to whatever remains of the functioning governance in King's Landing. The message is the same in every case. The dead are real, the wall is open, the long night is beginning, and the only question that matters now is whether the living are going to fight it together or separately. Some ignore the ravens, some send polite responses that mean nothing. Some, to Jon's cautious surprise, respond with genuine urgency, particularly from the Vale, but where bronze-tipped Royce has spent years reading the old histories and has been waiting for exactly this message. The Dragonglass operation begins immediately. There is a cache of it on Dragonstone. Stannis knows this, has always known it. The island is practically built on the stuff, and ships are dispatched south to retrieve it. The Night's Watch survivors, now reinforced by wildling fighters who know the terrain north of the wall better than anyone alive, set up listening posts and early warning systems. Maester Aemon, old and blind and more valuable than any weapon, dictates letters to the Citadel from Castle Black. demanding that the Meisters send every record they have of the last long night, every strategy that worked, every mistake that was made. The Citadel, to its credit, responds. Now, one young Maester in particular, newly arrived with the particular intensity of someone who has been right about something for years and has finally been given permission to act on it, arrives at Castle Black with 3 carts of documents and the look of a man who has been waiting for this moment his entire scholarly life. Sam Tarly. Another person the original timeline needed somewhere else entirely. In our world, he is here, in the North, with his knowledge and his obsessive attention and his genuine terror of everything north of the Wall that paradoxically makes him the best researcher anyone has, because his terror is specific and informed and fuels rather than paralyzes him. So, where does it leave us? Let's take stock of this world, this divergent North. Like this alternate history that began with a gate failing at the worst moment and ends with the living. All of them, free folk and Northerners and Baratheon men and Stark survivors, standing together against a cold that does not care about any of their distinctions. Jon Snow is not Lord Commander of the Night's Watch in this timeline. He is something less formally titled and more genuinely important. The bridge, the translator, the person who moves between worlds because he has always existed between worlds. He does not sit in any castle, he moves. He is everywhere and nowhere. The way you need a leader to be when the thing you're defending against is too large to face from one fixed position. Sansa Stark rules Winterfell and the North through the Council of Lords, which is not the absolute power of a Stark Lord of old, but is stronger for its collaborative architecture. She learned in the worst possible school, but she learned completely. She does not trust easily, she trusts correctly. These are different skills, and she has both. Mance Rayder leads the Free Folk, as he always did, as he always will, because leadership for him was never about title. The Free Folk are settled in the North now. They will never leave. They will intermarry with Northerners in the next generation, and that generation's children will not remember a time when the people north and south of the Wall were enemies. History will record this as inevitable. The people living it will know how close it came to going the other way. Stannis Baratheon holds a peculiar position. He is technically a king in the North. He never gave up his claim, and no one has formally denied it. But practically, he is something more like a general for hire, or a very heavily armed senior advisor. The North doesn't love him, but the North is alive partly because of him, and in the North, they remember. Theon Greyjoy recovers. Not completely. No one recovers completely from what Ramsay did to him, but functionally, meaningfully, in the ways that matter. He helps rebuild Winterfell. He does not return to the Iron Islands immediately. When he does eventually, it is as a different man. Not the Theon who wanted to own things he couldn't earn, but someone who has looked at the worst of what people can do and decided, consciously and clearly, that he wants to be on the other side of that. The White Walkers come. The long night comes, and the living, for the first time in 8,000 years, with the preparation and the unity and the specific bitter hard-won knowledge that this enemy requires, face it as something other than a surprise. They do not win cleanly. No one wins the long night cleanly. People die who should have lived. Battles are lost before they are won. There are nights when the cold is so profound and the enemy so vast that the alliance fractures along its old seams and has to be rebuilt from the foundation again, in the dark, by the people who remember why they built it. But they win. They win because one night at Castle Black, a gate failed at the worst possible moment and forced the living to stop treating each other as enemies long enough to face the actual one. They win because Jon Snow opened the door between two peoples who needed each other and refused to admit it. They win because Mance Rayder carried his 100,000 people south through impossible cold and impossible politics and trusted that on the other side of the Wall, there were people worth trusting. They win because the North remembered, and this time, unlike so many times before, remembering was enough. The one thing this theory keeps coming back to, the thread that runs through every act, every decision, every divergent consequence, is this. The Wall was never just a wall. It was an excuse for the living to pretend they weren't all on the same side. The Night's Watch on one side, the Wildlings on the other. On and between them, a 700-foot monument to the idea that the people you grew up fearing are your real enemies, rather than the thing in the dark that kills everyone equally. Mance Rayder knew this. Jon Snow learned it. The rest of the North had to have it demonstrated, expensively and painfully, the way humans have always needed the most important lessons demonstrated. What if the Wildlings had won at Castle Black in Season 4? They would have flooded south. They would have settled the empty North. They would have fought the Boltons. They would have forced the living to unite a season, a year, maybe a generation before the original timeline managed it. Or they would have given the war against the dead a fighting chance that the original story, with all its betrayals and distractions and the terrible human tendency to fight the wrong enemy at the wrong time, never quite assembled in time. The wall fell. The cold came in. And the North, all of it, wildlings and crows and Starks and Baratheons and the lords in their cold castles and the free people in their rough new settlements, turned together and faced the dark. That is the theory. That is the world, not a safer world, not a kinder one, but one that, at the last possible moment, chose alliance over tradition, survival over pride, the living over the dead. The North remembers, and this time it remembered the right things. By extended analysis, the characters transformed. Jon Snow, the man between worlds. There is a version of Jon Snow in the original timeline who is almost undone by his own decency. He is a man of honor in a world that punishes honor. He tells the truth when he should lie. He keeps oaths that have already been broken by the people who demanded them. He is killed for doing exactly what a just man should do, resurrected by forces he doesn't understand, and then spends the rest of his story carrying the weight of that resurrection in silence. In our timeline, Jon Snow is not undone. He is tested, harder in some ways than the original story tests him. But the testing produces something different, something more whole. It starts with the night the wall fell. Jon Snow in the original story. Carries the guilt of leaving the free folk, leaving Ygritte, as a wound that never entirely heals. He loved her, and he left her, and she died in his arms, forgiving him, or something close to forgiving him. And that is the kind of ending that hollows a person out and leaves the shape standing. In our timeline, Ygritte does not die at Castle Black. In the chaos of the night, in the wildlings pouring through the inner gate, Ygritte survives. She is not the arrow that kills Jon Snow's heart. She is something harder and stranger. She is alive. They do not get back together. That story, the two of them in the cave, the intimacy of two people from enemy worlds choosing each other against all logic, cannot be repeated. Too much has happened. Jon killed the half-hand. He left. Whatever they were, they cannot be that again. But she is alive. And that aliveness changes Jon in ways that death would not. He has to live with the complexity of a person, not the clean grief of a ghost. He has to see her across a campfire and know that they made different choices and both of them survived. He learns from this that surviving the choices you make is harder than mourning them, and that harder lesson makes him better at everything else. Less given to the martyrdom that always lurked around the edges of the original Jon Snow's story. Less inclined to absorb suffering as though it were his natural medium. More willing to insist quietly that the world he is trying to build is worth being alive in. When he stands in Winterfell's great hall and tells the assembled lords that unity is their only weapon against the dead, he is not performing conviction. He has earned it. All through the specific education of a man who has been wrong about enemies and right about people and survived the gap between those two things. Tormund Giantsbane, the necessary man. In the original story, Tormund is largely comic relief with genuine menace underneath. The big red giant who loves Jon Snow, who makes wildling culture vivid and human, who survives every battle through a combination of skill and the particular narrative armor of being someone the audience has decided they can't lose. In our timeline, Tormund is something more. He is the wildling equivalent of what Jon Snow is to the Night's Watch. The translator, the person who makes the alliance work through the daily friction of two cultures learning to live next to each other. He is not diplomatic in any conventional sense. He says everything he thinks, usually at volume, in language that the Northern Lords find alarming, and their servants find hilarious. But he is wise in a way that doesn't look like wisdom. He knows when to push and when to let something go. He knows which arguments are worth having, and which ones are just ego-claiming territory. He has been managing the egos of clan leaders for years, and Northern Lords are, when you get down to it, just clan leaders with better furniture. The friendship between Tormund and Jon Snow, which in the original timeline is built across the Wall's divide through circumstance, becomes in our timeline something more structurally significant. They are the co-authors of the alliance. They are the two people who sit on either side of every negotiation and make sure neither side walks away feeling like they lost. It is not always graceful work. There are shouting matches. There are nights when Jon comes back to his tent looking like he's been arguing with the weather, but the work gets done. Tormund also has something else in this timeline, a home. Not a permanent settlement, he is too much of the free folk for that, but a claimed territory, a place his people have planted roots in. For a man who has spent his entire life in motion, whose culture defines itself by freedom from the fixed and the permanent, the act of planting roots is quietly transformative. He does not become sedentary, he becomes grounded. There is a difference, and the difference matters when the darkness comes. Sansa Stark, the true architect. Here is the central argument about Sansa Stark that our timeline makes clearest. She was always the right person for the North. Not Jon, who was a leader but not a governor. Not Robb, who was a general but was always running towards something that killed him. Not Bran, who will become something too large and too strange for the ordinary work of managing a territory and its people. Sansa. She has her mother's organizational mind and her father's incorruptible values and her own something, a structural intelligence, an ability to see the architecture of power and the pressure points in any arrangement, that she developed the hard way through captivity and observation and the long education of being underestimated by everyone who was simultaneously trying to use her. She manages the Northern Council with the particular skill of someone who knows that formal authority and practical authority are different things, and that the second is more important. She doesn't command the lords. She builds the conditions in which the lords command themselves, toward outcomes she has already determined. She gives them ownership of decisions she has already steered them toward. She is, in the language of modern organizational theory, a consensus architect. This drives some of the lords mad. Lord Umber wants someone who will just stand up and say, "Here is what we're doing." He has spent his life in a world where authority is loud and direct and backed by the threat of force. Sansa's authority is quieter and therefore, to men like Umber, harder to locate. He cannot argue against it because it never presents itself as a target. He learns to respect it eventually because results are results. The North, under Sansa's management of the Council, prepares for the long night better than any political entity in Westeros. Food stores, shelter, dragonglass distribution, allied networks that extend through the Vale and into the Riverlands, a working relationship with the Wildling settlements that is genuinely cooperative rather than barely tolerant. She built all of this through the slow, unglamorous, essential work of managing people. And when the darkness comes, those preparations save lives in numbers that no battle could. Her personal story is quieter than it would be in another kind of narrative. She does not have a great romance or a dramatic revenge or a single moment of cathartic triumph over the people who hurt her. She has something better, a life she has built consciously, out of the ruins of what was taken from her, in the place that was always hers. She is home, as if she is useful. She is, for the first time since her father rode south and everything fell apart, exactly where she is supposed to be. Mance Rayder, the king who won by losing. The tragedy of Mance Rayder in the original timeline is that he wins the important argument. The dead are real, the wall must open, the living must unite, and is killed before he can see it proven. He is burned by Stannis as a deserter, saved at the last second by Melisandre's magic and Jon's mercy, sent on a mission south disguised as a dead man, and then disappears from the story, having never quite gotten credit for being right about everything. In our timeline, he lives. He lives, and he is present for the confirmation of everything he spent decades trying to tell anyone who would listen. He is there when the first reports come in from north of the wall. He is there when the council finally, formally accepts that the long night is coming. He does not say, "I told you so." He is not that kind of man. He simply nods once slowly, with the expression of someone who has been carrying a weight for a very long time and has finally been allowed to set it down. His relationship with Stannis Baratheon is one of the most unexpected and interesting dynamics of the entire alternative timeline. These are two men who should despise each other. One is a king who demands submission. One is a leader who defines himself by its refusal. One is lawful to the point of rigidity. One is free to the point of chaos. They have nothing in common except intelligence, stubbornness, and the genuine conviction that the thing coming from the north matters more than anything else. They argue constantly, about strategy, about resource allocation, about the proper chain of command. Mance finds the concept philosophically offensive. Stannis finds Mance's rejection of it strategically dangerous. They are never friends, but they are the kind of enemies who have learned that the enemy in front of them is worse than the enemy beside them, and that understanding becomes, over time, its own kind of alliance. When the battle against the dead finally comes, and it does come, harder and colder, and more relentless than even the most prepared among them expected, Mance Rayder fights in the front lines, not because he has to, not because anyone ordered him to, but because he is the king beyond the wall, and kings in the culture he chose lead from the front, and this is his war, the war he always knew was coming, and he will face it standing up. Oh, he survives it, barely, with a wound that will trouble him for the rest of his life and a particular expression in his eyes that people who have faced the dead and lived all share, the expression of someone who looked into an abyss and found, to their own surprise, that they were still themselves on the other side. The Night's Watch, an institution reborn. The Night's Watch, in the aftermath of the Wall's fall, faces an institutional identity crisis that is both practical and philosophical. Their purpose, defending the Wall, manning the castles, holding the line against the Wildlings, is suddenly and completely obsolete. The Wall is open. The Wildlings are south. The thing they were actually guarding against, which most of them never quite believed in, is the enemy now. What are they for? This question is answered differently than you might expect. The surviving brothers, under the temporary command of a sergeant named Dolorous Ed Tollett, who has survived everything through the particular resilience of someone who expected everything to go wrong and is therefore never surprised when it does, make a pragmatic and somewhat radical decision. They recruit. They recruit wildlings. They recruit from the northern houses. They recruit anyone who is willing to take the oath and stand a watch, because the purpose of the Night's Watch is not to guard against wildlings. The purpose, stripped back to its founding intent, is to guard the living against the dead, and the dead don't care whether you were born north or south of the Wall. The new Night's Watch is strange and contentious and loud and multilingual, and occasionally breaks out in fights that have to be settled through the combination of Ed's exhausted authority and Tormund's physical presence. It is nothing like the ancient order of Black Brothers who recited their oath in solemn unison. It is better, because an ancient order that had declined to 102 men fighting a losing battle against everything is not a functioning institution. It is a monument, and monuments, however honorable, do not stop armies of the dead. Ed Tollett, who never asked for any responsibility and has been given it anyway in the way that competent, unassuming people always are, becomes the Lord Commander of a rebuilt Night's Watch that actually has the manpower and the purpose to function. Boss, he greets this promotion with the face of a man who expected this too, found it as grim as anticipated, and is going to do it properly anyway. "What do I call myself?" he asks Jon, the night he accepts the command. "Lord Commander," Jon says. "Right, I was hoping for something more cheerful." He straightens his black cloak. "Well, at least the uniform is the same." The battle lines. The battle against the White Walkers, when it comes, is fought differently in our timeline than in the original. Not because the enemy is different. The enemy is exactly as it always was, cold and patient and infinite, the dead in their hundreds of thousands, the walkers themselves moving through the chaos like gods of winter. But the living who face them are organized differently. In the original story, Emul the Long Night's battle is essentially a last stand. Winterfell as the final redoubt, forces committed to a single engagement, the fate of humanity balancing on one night in one castle, and a small group of people who are fighting simultaneously exhausted and outnumbered. In our timeline, the defense is layered, Castle Black as the forward position, reinforced, supplied, manned by the new Night's Watch and wildling scouts who know the terrain. 3 intermediate positions at abandoned holdfasts along the King's Road, each supplied with dragon glass and Valyrian steel, and the particular brutal simplicity of defenders who know that they are buying time, not winning. Winterfell as the strategic center, command, reserves, the lords and their household troops, And behind Winterfell, on White Harbor as the evacuation point for the wounded, and the civilians and the children, because a war you lose entirely, because you tried to protect, everything is worse than a war you lose, partly because you protected the most important things. Jon Snow is at Castle Black for the first engagement. He is where he always is, at the point where the two worlds meet, the world of the living and the world of the dead. Ghost is beside him. The black direwolf, grown enormous now, white as his name, has been waiting for this his entire life in the particular animal way of creatures who understand purpose at a frequency below language. The first wave comes on a night with no stars. They come out of the dark and they come without sound. Which is the thing about them that no description quite prepares you for. The absence of sound where there should be the sounds of an army, the complete silence of the dead who do not need to breathe or speak or signal with war drums. They are simply there, and then they are more there, and then they are at the walls. Dragonglass holds, fire holds, Valyrian steel holds. The Night's Watch brothers fight with the particular focus of people defending the last thing worth defending, and the wildling fighters beside them fight with the anger of people who have been running from this for years and have finally been allowed to turn around. Castle Black does not fall. Not that night, not the next night. On the third night, a breach opens in the eastern tower, and 50 of the dead pour through before it can be sealed. And 6 brothers of the Night's Watch die in the courtyard before the breach is closed. But it holds. The wall holds. Not because the wall has magic in it, not because of the ice and the ancient enchantments that were weakened when the horn of Joramun was never blown in this timeline. It holds because of the people on it. 102 men, then 200, then 500, then 1,000, armed and ready and absolutely unwilling to step back. The Night King comes to the wall on the 7th night. He comes alone, or apparently alone, which is the most terrifying version. He stands in the snow at the wall's base, and he looks up and his eyes are the blue of the deepest cold, and the cold radiates off him in waves that even the men on the wall, 700 feet above, can feel. And Jon Snow goes to the wall's edge and looks down at him. Across an impossible distance, through the dark and the cold, they look at each other, the king of the dead and the man between worlds. Jon thinks of everything, of Ygritte, alive, of Sansa in Winterfell's great hall, managing the impossible with her particular precision, of Mance Rayder, who carried 100,000 people south so they could stand here tonight, of Ned Stark, of Castle Black, of the oath he swore and what it actually meant underneath all the words. He thinks, the dead don't negotiate, they don't get tired, but they can be stopped. They have been stopped before. He raises the dragonglass spear, a weapon Sam made for him, obsessively, perfectly. He has the dragonglass head socketed into a long claw haft that gives it the reach of a cavalry weapon. And he makes the gesture that in the language of the free folk means, come then, we are ready. The Night King looks at him for one long moment. Then he turns and walks back into the dark, not retreat, not defeat. Patient withdrawal, the way a glacier withdraws. It will be back, further along, in its own time, by its own geometry. But not tonight. Tonight, the wall holds. And inside the walls, in the warmth that costs so much to maintain, the living breathe. They breathe and they rest and they prepare and they hold on to each other in the dark. Stark and Bolton survivor and wildling and crow and Baratheon man. All the impossible combinations of people who should never have worked together and do. And the cold outside does what the cold always does. It pushes against every wall, every fire, every warm body. And for tonight, for this night, it is not enough. The living are still here. The North still stands. And somewhere in the dark beyond the wall, an army that has waited 8,000 years has learned for the first time that waiting is not the same as winning. Final thoughts, every what. If theory is, at its core, an argument about what mattered, about which hinge moments carry the most weight, about which decisions, reversed or slightly altered, produce the most different world, this one argues that the most important hinge in the story of Game of Thrones was not the Red Wedding, not Ned Stark's execution, while not the birth of Daenerys' dragons. It was a gate an inner gate at Castle Black, on a cold night in the 4th year of Joffrey's reign, held by 6 men who died holding it. When that gate holds, Jon Snow's story takes one path, north, alone, into the cold, building the alliance the hard way over years of suffering and sacrifice. When it fails, his story takes another path, south, faster, with Mance Rayder as an unexpected partner, and the terrible gift of crisis forcing what diplomacy alone could never achieve. The Wildlings were never the enemy. The Wildlings were the first people to understand the actual enemy. They lived with the threat of the dead as a daily reality for generations, while the rest of Westeros debated succession and played at thrones. They carried the warning south the only way they could, not in ravens or speeches or carefully worded diplomatic communiques, but in their feet, their bodies, their 100,000 lives moving through an open gate. What if the invasion had succeeded? The North would have been shaken to its roots. The Boltons would have fallen faster. Winterfell would have returned to the Starks sooner. The alliance against the dead would have been built earlier, from necessity rather than tragedy. And the long night, when it came, would have met not a fractured realm of squabbling survivors, but something harder and stranger and more powerful. A people who had already learned, the hard way, that the wall between us and them is always smaller than the wall between the living and the dead. That's the theory. That's the world. What if the Wildlings won? Then, in the end, so did everyone else.